Jared Polin, FroKnowsPhoto.com, and for the past few days since Sony announced their RX1R version 3, I've been trying to rack my brain on what type of video do I want to make. Now, back in the day when we had surprise announcements like Sony had with this one, I would make a preview video that would talk about the specs and give some basic thoughts, even though we didn't have the camera just yet. But this one is different. This is a very rantable type announcement, and I'm gonna tell you why. It's rantable because Sony didn't let anybody know about this camera before it was announced. And usually you're like, okay, did I just get forgotten? We didn't find out that this camera got announced until we got a preview, an email from Sony that was like, we just announced this, get onto a phone call, we're gonna tell you about it, which is kind of odd and weird, and I have some theories on why they did that, and I'm gonna get to that in just a second. But I quickly wanna bring up these specs for a reason before I get into the full-on rant, because it's important to talk about in regards to the whole rant. So let's quickly look at some of the specs of the RX1R3, as this is going to drive the rant here. It's a 61 megapixel full frame sensor, which is amazing because it's the same sensor that you find in the A7R4 and the A7R5. Mind you, that they were released in 2019. It of course has the Bion's XR processor and the updated AI processor to give you amazing autofocus. None of this stuff is bad. This is all great, but you start to run into problems when you get into things like the 3-inch touchscreen that is flush to the back of the camera, which I personally like, and I don't care about flip-out rotatable screens, but they took that out, which was originally in the older versions of the camera. You don't have a pop-up EVF, but you now have an integrated EVF, which is a big deal to me because I love having an EVF built into the camera. But where I start to have some problems is the last camera came out roughly 10 years ago, and this is a 13-year-old type product when they put it out. It was amazing back in the day when they put out this full-frame, amazing sensor with a 35 f2 Zeiss lens on it. It was impressive back then. But in 2025, is it impressive today? The answer is no. It's recycled parts at a premium price. And we're going to talk about the price in just a second, but let's talk about that Zeiss lens. It's the same lens that you found in the 10-year-old camera, and it makes no sense to go with that. We haven't heard Zeiss's name with Sony in a long time. This is a retread, and it doesn't make any sense. It's not to say that it's a not good lens, but this camera has a leaf shutter, which means you're maxing your shutter speed out at 1/2000th of a second at f2. It doesn't have a ND filter built in, which is something that Fuji puts into their cameras and is sexy. The Fujis are absolutely sexy. There's also no IBIS in this camera. So that is something that it should have for the price that it is. It also shoots at only 5 frames per second. Not that that is a huge deal, but the huge deal is the fact that Sony already makes one of the most incredible, not pocketable sized cameras, because this RX1R3 isn't pocketable either, but one of the greatest cameras ever created is the Sony A7CR. That basically has the same specs as this, but better, with IBIS, a bigger battery, a grip. Yeah, this new Sony point and shoot added a bigger battery, that's all well and good, but the price is $5,100. That is absolutely insane for recycled parts. Sure, they're great parts for the most part, but when something else exists like the A7CR, which is by far the most incredible, powerful 61 megapixel camera that exists on the market, it is for less money. $3,000 for that body. You want to get a 35 f2 on there? You buy the Sigma 35 f2 for $719, and you're still less money than this. Now, where it also gets incredibly insane when it comes to pricing is the fact that if you want the case that Sony makes for this camera, that's $250. You want a lens hood for this lens? That's $200. You want a thumb grip? Any guesses as to what the thumb grip would cost? $300. Are you absolutely insane and out of your mind? You're not Leica in this case. 10 years ago when you released a camera similar to this, incredible for that time period. But this seems to be like Sony is chasing after something that other people already do better. That's not to say they shouldn't do something, but this camera is highly unnecessary when the A7CR already exists. That camera is incredible. That camera is sexy. It was sexy and amazing when it came out. This is not. So why would they hide this from creators and the news? And one of the reasons they give are leaks. Well, we didn't want it to leak to Sony Alpha rumors. And my thoughts on that is, well, that's bullshit. You eschew every other creator, the 50, the 100, however many outlets that exist that actually talk about your product because you're worried about one website? That's stupid. 2, the pre-sale happened the day after the camera was announced. So usually you have a pre-sale come up after creators have said what they said, or news people have reviewed it, and all the tech channels give their thoughts on it. My feeling here is that Sony was afraid of what people like me and other people in the industry would say about this camera. It is a 10-year-old retread of a camera. It doesn't make sense that they put this camera out at all. It isn't sexy, it's overpriced, and you could say at $5,100, well, tariffs are built in, because if you look at the Canadian or the European price and you reverse engineer that, it comes out to like $600 in tariffs. But even at $4,500, this camera is overpriced because of what it offers. It's not pocketable. You can't put it in pockets unless you're wearing Jenko jeans, but I'm tired of that statement of like, it's pocketable. I'm also tired of the statement that they try to push the narrative of, well, you know, you're a photographer and maybe you already own an A7R5, but you don't want to take it around every day because it's just too big and you gotta fiddle with buttons. Well, this, you could just put it into auto and take pictures. Well, shit, should you be spending $5,000 extra or $5,100 on top of the system you already have because you want something smaller? A7CR. That's incredible. And I'm not sitting here just to rip on Sony. It's the choices that they made to put this camera out. It makes absolutely no sense because the A7CR is incredible. Fuji has their X100s. They're sexy. They have their GFX 100 RF. That is sexy. It's a medium format camera. No, it doesn't have the IBIS, but it's less money than this, and it's sexy. What? Like, you don't need this. You can't upgrade this in the future. Leica has their Q3 series. It's Leica, so it's automatically sexy because it's more expensive. But they stick to what they do. They're not cannibalizing or they're not putting out a camera that already exists in another form, especially after 10 years. After 10 years that people waited, I don't even think you should have waited because the A7C2 and the A7CR are, in my mind, almost pocketable cameras that replace the need for the point and shoot. It's not about being lighter, it's barely lighter when you put on a lens. I want Sony, you already did something amazing with the A7CR. This camera, unnecessary, overpriced, and the fact that you hid it from us all and just put it out shows, in my opinion, that you were afraid of what we had to say because you already knew. You already knew that this wasn't going to be a hit. It's just not the right choice. A7CR, that's a right choice for less money. You want to get sexy with the Fuji? That's sexy. Leica, you know my thoughts on Leica. That's my rant there. We're going to talk more about this on the next Fronos Photo Raw Talk podcast that comes out every Friday. If you're not familiar with our podcast, go to fronosphoto.com/podcast or wherever you get your podcast, Spotify, iTunes. We even put up the audio only on YouTube, so you can check us out. We do those episodes weekly. We're up to 160 of them. So thank you very much for watching. Jared, PolinFronosPhoto.com. See ya.